Hello everybody and welcome to CaiKeys. I have some good news for you and some bad news for you. The bad news first. Ladies and gentlemen, it's officially Rover. My daily driver, the Rover 75, which I reviewed a few weeks ago, is no more. It is deceased. It failed its MOT for rust and it is awaiting the scrapper. The good news is that I have a replacement. Depending on what you think of these things, that might be two lots of bad news. But this thing's great. I'm going to tell you why.
Let's turn the CaiKeys.
So here we are behind the wheel of the Toyota Yaris Mk1, my Toyota Yaris Mk1. How exactly did me, CaiKeys, the lover of weird and cool cars, end up owning what is perhaps one of the most regular cars ever made? Well, as I said in the introduction to this video, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, it's officially Rover. The Rover 75, which was my daily driver, has unfortunately gone to heaven. Well, not yet. I'd say it's in intensive care. No, the life support machine is well and truly switched off. The Rover 75 went for its MOT and failed fairly spectacularly on rust. I knew this day was coming. I bought the car a few years ago and it was only ever a kind of stopgap kind of thing, and it's done me very well over those 2 years. And I was in need of another vehicle. I do have other vehicles, but none of them work. I have about, 4 or 5 cars or something, however many I have, and none of them were roadworthy. My friend at the time, well, sorry, he's still my friend, I don't know why I said that. My friend he's found one now, a new car. He's looking for a new car, and he said, I have my old Fiesta, you can pay me 400 quid or whatever, you can have Nevi, the humble 1.2 litre Ford Fiesta without a fifth gear. And I said, what? Yeah, hell yeah, I'll go for it, man. I need a car. But unfortunately, my friend was struck down with lumbago, and as a result, he was unable to sell his car. Now, I've just recently started a new job, and I had training Thursday, Friday, and I absolutely needed to get a car for tomorrow. It was Wednesday afternoon. Oh God, I need to get into work. I could take a taxi, I guess, but it'll add up and everything. And I looked on eBay because I needed a car anyway, and I saw this Toyota Yaris. It was fairly close to me. It was about a half an hour's drive away. It had an MOT and it was being sold for the princely sum of £650. I could not jump up at my phone and call the seller fast enough. He was called Tony, so I said, Tony, my man, I'm in need of a car. Can I come down and see your majestic automobile? And that car had what's quite possibly the greatest eBay seller description of all time. He basically said, spec is not the best, rear parcel shelf has gone missing, speakers are rubbish, gets me to work, alright little car. Great, okay, so I went down to Gorton, I had a chat with a guy, lovely bloke, and basically I walked away about 15 minutes later. Well, I drove away in this, my as of yet unnamed Toyota Yaris Mk1, which I've had for 3 or 4 days. Now, the Toyota Yaris Mk1 was a successor to the Toyota Starlet. Now, Toyota's internal propaganda, that's the wrong word, internal documentation says that the Toyota Starlet only ever really caught around 10% of the UK hatchback market, and that's a figure that I can believe, because how often do you see a Starlet? They were competent cars. Admittedly, they rusted out, but so does every old car, especially hatchbacks, but mechanically they were bang on. But they just didn't seem to capture the public's imagination. They didn't sell too many of them. And its successor is this, the Toyota Yaris Mk1. The Mk1 Yaris was built on the Toyota NBC platform. Now, that was their essentially basic compact car platform, and in the UK we didn't really have many cars in this platform, and to be fair, there weren't that many cars built on it. The Toyota Yaris and the Toyota Yaris Verso MPV, which is an even uglier version of this, was built on the same platform. Although the Yaris Verso isn't just a Yaris with a funny box in the back, it's a fairly different car. There's an excellent video by Furious Driving on that car if you're interested. Anyway, back to my Yaris, the hatchback, the NBC platform. In Japan, they built a few different cars on it. I believe the Scion BB, the Toyota BB, was built on that platform. Some of the Toyota Wills, bizarre looking things, kind of ugly, kind of cool, were also built on the same platform, but we only really had to worry about those two cars. Interesting little thing, there's a few model differences. So in Europe and everything, it was called the Yaris. In other markets, such as Asia or whatever, it was called the Toyota Vitz. And in America, it was sold in a saloon body as well as the Toyota Echo. In Canada, for some reason, these things didn't have a digital dash. So the Toyota Yaris Mk1 was sold with this really cool digital dash, which you can see here. And that is the cool feature of this car. For some reason, the T-Sport versions, which are their fast versions, just had normal analog gauges, and I don't know why you'd want those, because the digital speedometer is cooler. For the Canadian market, they all had analog gauges, and I don't know why they did that. Perhaps someone will enlighten me, but I think a digital speedometer, if anything, is a selling point because they look great. So anyway, the Toyota Yaris Mk1, built from 1999 to late 2005, although you could purchase them for the 2006 model year. Production ended in October 2005 in France and ended in Japan a little bit before that. There were a plethora of engine choices available. Well, no, there weren't. For the average consumer, there were just two choices really. There were a few variations, but you could get the 1 litre, which this thing has, or the 1.3 litre engine, which the one that I wished I got has, because the 1 litre engine is fairly lethargic. There was also the 1.5 litre engine in the T-Sport, which kicked out, I want to say, around 140 brake horsepower. There'll be a figure somewhere around here. And there was also, if you were incredibly frugal, the 1.4 litre diesel, which achieves some fairly silly miles per gallon. You give way to me, thank you, sir. The 1 litre engine that this thing has is the basic engine. Everything in this thing is base. As far as I can tell from looking around the thing, there are no additional options on this car. It doesn't even have central locking. Whether or not they came with those originally, I need to find out, but if it did, this doesn't work. You don't really have anything of note in here, which is why I love the thing. You've got wind down windows, you've got no AC, everything is manual, and I really genuinely respect that. Why I've driven through Rochdale, I don't know. It's not a nice place. I'm going to have to censor quite a lot of my profanity driving around this place, but Rochdale enrages me. Look at that. Horrible. I think the most endearing thing about this car is the lack of specification. I don't know why, but I think that if I got this in a higher spec, I wouldn't like it as much. There's something really nice about a car that you don't have to worry about, a car with manual everything. I think that's why I'm quite a fan of classic cars. I like that kind of raw, stripped back experience you have. Of course, there's only so raw and stripped back a Toyota Yaris can be. At the end of the day, it's an underpowered hatchback, but it's endearing, it's nice. And one thing that I've noticed about the Yaris, which I kind of like, is this weird Toyota design language they had in the 1990s. The 1990s were a wild time. No time for squares, because every car that I have reviewed from this era has been incredibly bubbly. And it marks a massive departure from 1980s cars where everything was designed with a ruler. Everything in the 1990s, the late 90s and the early 2000s was designed with a compass. Everything is very sweeping, there's arches everywhere. There's not a single square in the interior of this car. Even this real-time trip computer with like instant MPG and everything, which is great fun and very distracting. The edges are rounded. They're not square. People just must have liked ovals back in the day a lot. And the Toyota Yaris dash is taking that to its logical extreme. Very, very similar to the Ford Ka dashboard, where everything was an oval, although this feels a lot more composed and a lot more together than the Ford Ka. This is the better built car. This is the better car, to be fair. So everything's oval in here. The dash is kind of hideous, the entire car is kind of hideous, but I quite like it. It also comes in this lovely sort of dentist chair blue is what I'm going to coin it, because I'm pretty sure that when I go to the dentist, I actually lie back in this chair on the incredibly hard headrests that feel like stone. They're vinyl. Everything in here is a hard touch plastic, but it's very hard wearing. These things don't really tend to show their age inside, and quite a nice place to be. It's got that kind of Yaris smell. It smells like a nursing home that's been cleaned. There's no smell of wee, but there is a very strong smell of like fabric seats, like old person chairs, and it's quite a nice smell. You've got a tape deck in here. That's about it as far as I can say for the interior. It's a Yaris, you get what you get. You've got decent engines. Regarding reliability, the Toyota Yaris is a Toyota. There's a reason you still see these things about. They don't go wrong. None of the engines in these things really tend to have any problems. General consensus on Japanese cars is that the diesels typically aren't as good as the petrols, but even the 1.4 diesel, I've heard it just gives silly MPG. It might be a bit tractor-like. Hello, bike. Oh, there's loads of them. Look at that. There's a few of them. Hello, other bike. It's a Honda. I don't know my bikes. This is CaiKeys, not bike keys. Smell nice though. I like that Castrol one, the one that first passed us. I like the paint scheme on that. That's all I know about them. As I was saying, there's not really anything to go wrong for on the engines on these. Regarding gearboxes, you had two options as far as we're concerned. In Japan, they had a CVT as well, optionally for the automatic. But the automatic gearbox on these can have issues. You're going to go for a manual. It's a cheap hatchback, get a manual. I can keep up with them. Don't be lazy. Get a manual. It's the kind of car that rewards you for driving as a manual anyway. This is a car enthusiast channel. You're going to be getting a manual if you're going to be getting one of these cars at all. The automatic, I believe, was an automated manual, really, as opposed to something like a torque converter, and it did have a few problems. Reliability on those is good, but not up to Toyota's usual standard. Another thing that does go wrong in these is the power steering. It's not on a traditional pump. For some reason, I don't know whether it was cost-cutting or quirky design, but Toyota fitted one of those terrible electric power steering units, which are vague at best and dangerous at worst. This has had it disabled because the seller said that the electric power steering module in this car went wrong, and that when he was trying to turn at junctions, the wheel would lock itself and the car would just go round in circles and circles and circles. I can't find too much information online about this, whether this is a common problem or something fairly rare, but he's disabled it, and to be honest, it's better for that. Electric power steering never really works particularly well. Road feel is always weird, and progression is even weirder. And without that electric power steering, the car becomes kind of alright to drive. I'm not sure steering is particularly great on it. There's not really much feel through the wheel. Everything is very light even without power steering, and the thing is, there's no real dead zones in this wheel. When I'm driving a car with bad steering, usually there's like a big dead zone here, but if I do that, the car does move. It's very responsive. I just don't feel there's much feedback. There's not much real weight through the wheel, if that makes sense. And I can't place my finger on exactly why I'm not a fan of the steering of this car. Perhaps I just feel that it's a little bit too light. There's not really much feedback. It steers straight and true. It's very predictable. I'm just not a massive fan of the steering. The suspension in this car as a whole, its cornering ability is fairly subpar. The entire driving experience as a whole. Note to Ethan, I just scratched my balls there, so don't include that bit. The entire driving experience as a whole in this car is not the best, but it's never meant to be. This is a commuter vehicle that gets me to and from work. Comparing this car to the Nissan Micra, I really prefer the way that the Nissan Micra drives. I don't think there's any comparison to be made between the two. The Nissan Micra, yeah, okay, the one that I've driven was a 1.6 litre CC, and as a result, it was a little bit sporty. It was a hell of a lot more powerful. It felt about 3 times as fast as this thing. But the steering, the engagement, the road holding was better in the Micra than the Yaris. The Yaris feels a lot more comfort oriented, and it's a comfortable car. But if you're looking for a car that you can have a fair bit of fun in, the Yaris, the commuter versions, not it. The T-Sport, I'd love to drive one. So if anyone's got one and wants to lend me their CaiKeys so I can borrow one, please do. But as far as driving engagement goes, this, not so much. Regarding kit you could get in these things, not too much. The top spec on these, I want to say, was called the CDX. So you got things like electric mirrors, a slightly nicer steering wheel, aircon, nothing too fancy in these cars, but obviously it's a cheap commuter vehicle. One thing you did get that you don't get on the S trim, so I'm going to begin this by saying, in our modern age, this nanny state imposes things on us that we should be able to decide, like airbags. You don't need them. Toyota, the cool guys at Toyota knew this. Safety, look, if you want to go ahead and be safe, then you can. But if you're not too fussed, we'll have the passenger airbag be optional. And if you don't want a passenger airbag, you can have a glove box, which is the perfect size for storing all your bottles of alcohol in. CaiKeys does not endorse driving under alcohol consumption. Let's make that very clear. The fact is, this has an optional passenger airbag. It's not too out of the ordinary for cars of this age. But if you want kit, you're not going to get it. If you want reliability and you want a car that will get you from A to B forever, this is the car for you. This has done around 110,000 miles. The odometer does say different, and there's a reason for that. The odometer previously, part of it doesn't work, so they've swapped a new one in. There is a mileage discrepancy, DVLA, but yeah, 110,000 miles, this thing seems barely running. Just watch out for rust on these things, they go. If you want to see a Yaris for yourself, simply order a pizza and ask the bloke who delivers it if you can have a quick little look around his car. I'm sure he'll say yes if you slip him a tenner. They're nice little cars. There's not really much more to say about this thing. This is the new CaiKeys wagon, and this thing will be taking me across the country, not the globe yet. Will be taking me across the country to meet you lot, review your cars, and it will take me on many adventures. But for the most part, it will get me to and from work day in, day out. This is the new daily driver. I'm going to keep it as long as I theoretically can because this thing is great. As far as negatives go, it drives terribly and there's no power, but it's reliable, and that's all I need. I'm not that bothered about driving dynamics when I have to leave the house at 3:30 in the morning. I couldn't care less. I just need a decent heater, a decent sound system, which this thing doesn't have because it sounds terrible, and I just need something that will get me to work and from work. The CaiKeys commuter vehicle does not have to be anything too fancy. The Rover was great, but it was a diesel, and I work a lot closer to home now, and a diesel just would not be effective. It'd never get to temperature, which would end up causing problems, and I just wouldn't get that fuel efficiency doing about 6 miles a day. Just made sense to get this. So past CaiKeys, driving up to where he was going to drop off a piece of old antiquated technology, not this car, it was an amplifier for it was a stereo amplifier. Yeah, so he took it on the motorway, and so here's past CaiKeys explaining the gorgeous motorway experience. So here we are on the motorway in the Toyota Yaris. I thought, just quickly, why not take it on the motorway? I'm going this way anyway. 60 miles per hour, we are at 3,000 RPM, and personally, I think this is where the car feels most comfortable cruising. The real-time MPG display says that we're really averaging about 55 to 60 miles per gallon, which is great. Let's try and take it up to 70 miles per hour though. 65, 67, this is foot to the floor by the way, 70. So in real terms, we're probably doing about 67 miles per hour or so. Still feels like we can cruise at this speed fairly easily, and we're at 3,500 RPM. It's not the most refined thing in the world, it's not the quietest, there's a fair bit of wind noise in here. It's alright, but see what I mean about it being fairly short geared? It has to be because there's no power to the thing. So as a long distance traveller, this is doable, but not the best. And when we go to 70 miles per hour, our MPG decreases by around 10, so we're getting really about 40 miles per gallon or so, give or take a bit. Probably a bit higher than that. I'm probably being a bit too critical. These real-time MPG displays are not the most accurate. They just do what we can. Whilst we're accelerating to 70 miles per hour, let's see where that dips to. 28.7 under full acceleration. Not too shabby. I think that was my exit. Great. I don't want to make this video longer than it has to be, because really there isn't too much to say about this car. I'm kind of introducing this car, and you're going to see a fair bit of it. In the background of shots, you might see little pieces and bits and pieces of me going to car shows, recording from here. So say hello to the new CaiKeys motor. I want name suggestions, by the way. Bye. Sorry, this is as fast as I can go, mate. So, name suggestions for the new base spec, cheap as chips Toyota Yaris down in the comments below, please. Best one wins. Don't know what you win. I don't have anything to give you. I mean, you get the satisfaction of saying I named the CaiKeys Yaris. So, you know, when I'm on 20 billion subscribers, which I'm well on my way to, with your help, then I will, of course, give you a shout out. I don't care. Kind of feel quite cool winding the window down in the Yaris, sticking my arm out and blasting my music, and then people look at you like, what is that? That's the worst car I've ever seen. Whilst I was recording the B-reel for this video, you know, recording outside that dump that I just found lying around, I had a few people coming up to me and asking me what I was doing, and I said, well, I'm just filming, mate. But they got really they were confused as to why I was filming a video on this vehicle. And then one particular chap pulled up and he said, why are you filming it here? Because it was grim around there. And I just said, it kind of matches the environment, doesn't it? It's a scruffy car. Let's find a scruffy place for it. I like it. Everybody has a Yaris story. What's your Yaris story? Let me know in the comments. My Yaris story, my friend's mother has one, and I always kind of, well, had one. She's now got a Mark III, and she crashed it, and it kind of split in half, the Mark 1. She'd drive around in it, and I always liked the thing. There was something nice about it. It's very rare that you see a Yaris Mark 1 in really good condition, and that one, and this one, is something nice about it. A very unexceptional vehicle. I was going to take this to the Festival of the Unexceptional, but their cut-off is, I believe, 1999 or 98, and this is a 2001, so unfortunately I cannot enter it, but I think this is the perfect contender for the Festival of the Unexceptional. It's an unexceptional vehicle, and I think there's something exceptional about that. The majority of these are in the scrapyard, rotting away, or they're in your kitchen, because they have become washing machines. So it's nice to just keep one on the road for a while, and I do intend to keep this on the road for quite a while. It's such a good one, it just needs some preventative maintenance. It's had a little bit of welding. What car of this age hasn't? Another feature that I forgot to mention, which I will now very quickly, is the rear seat on these. In the 5-door and the 3-door version, this is the 3-door, it's on a rail. So if we're going to bring back my amputee friends that I've mentioned in previous videos, if they're coming along for the ride, we can move that row of seats right up as far forward as it can go, because they don't care, they don't have legs. They're going to be happy enough, and we're going to have a lot more boot space. If, however, I've got a few people maybe who do have all their limbs, and they're going to go in the back seats, and I'm going to push the seats back on that rail. I can't really demonstrate it because you need to be facing it, really. Really neat little feature from Toyota. If you don't need that rear space then, and you need cargo space, just push them up. You got 60/40 folding rear seats. For the size, this isn't as practical as the Yaris Verso MPV, but it's also not as grotesque. You can fit a surprising amount of things in here, and it's such a tiny car, I can probably reach the very back of the car very easily. It's tiny, it's so easy to park. I typically have larger cars, but I really understand the appeal of this thing. Fantastic piece of machinery. Fairly refined for a 1-litre engine, I must say. Nothing really to go wrong. Naturally aspirated, so although it feels like an asthmatic dog is driving the wheels, it just goes on and on and on and on and on forever. Do you think this is a fair successor to the Rover? Okay, fine. It's a little bit of a step down. It's not as comfortable. It's not as fast. It doesn't have as much prestige. But I like it. And if I like it, that's all that matters. There's something very endearing about this car, something that I really do genuinely appreciate. I can't really place my finger on what it is. Maybe it's the fact that it's a fairly bog standard commuter vehicle that's in decent condition. It's something of a little bit of a rarity these days. Most Yarises you see are on their last legs. This one has another 110,000 miles at least, if we're being accurate, or another 59,000 miles if we're using this speedometer, which is certainly accurate. I do need to fix that. Just driving into Tesco, we can park this thing anywhere as well, because it doesn't matter. If you're driving a cheap car, it doesn't matter if it gets dented. So, you know, I've got a Nissan Elgrand, I've got a Mercedes 190, and those are my nice cars, and I don't want to take the... Oh, I thought that was a Yaris Verso. It's not, it's a Jimny. I would have parked up to it and we would have been able to get a good look at how awful they are. But yeah, it's a cheap car, you can park it anywhere, it doesn't matter. And when you're driving a nice car, you don't want... Yeah. Here's the Yaris's predecessor, the Toyota Starlet. Oh, get in here. Look at this, Yaris next to Starlet. I hope those don't own the Starlet, because it's going to be awkward, because I'm going to say, can I record your car? And they'll be like, no, that's really weird. There you have it, the CaiKeys Yaris next to its predecessor, the Starlet. The Yaris isn't the prettiest or the fastest thing around, but there's a certain charm to it. But what matters most is that it'll get me about, achieve good miles per gallon, and probably never break down. You don't always need the fastest or most unique vehicle, and I hope that this thing will prove to be a reliable motor for the foreseeable. Thanks for watching, and don't forget your CaiKeys.